The courtroom of the Harris County Superior Court smelled of polished mahogany and something older, something like consequence, but on this Tuesday morning in late October, only one man believed he was above it. Marcus Hartwell leaned back in his chair at the plaintiff's table, and he smiled. Not a quiet smile, not the restrained satisfaction of a man who has won a difficult legal battle. No, this was the smile of a conqueror surveying scorched earth. This was the smile of a man who believed he had committed the perfect crime in broad daylight, inside a court of law, with a judge watching, and gotten away with every single piece of it. His attorney Garrett Brooks was still organising papers. The judge had not yet returned from recess, but Marcus was already celebrating. He adjusted his cufflinks, 18-karat gold. One was engraved with his initials, and turned his entire body toward the defendant's table, toward Vivian. She sat motionless. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her auburn hair fell like a curtain across one shoulder. She did not look at him, and that made his smile wider. "You know what the beautiful thing is, Viv," he said, his voice low enough for only the nearby rows to hear, but loud enough that he wanted them to hear. "I told you this would happen. 3 years ago, I sat across from you at our kitchen table and I said, you will walk away from this marriage with nothing. And look at you now." He gestured at her with an open hand, as if presenting evidence of her insignificance. Clear his throat. "Nothing." Garrett placed a hand on Marcus's arm. "Marcus, save it for after." Marcus shrugged him off. "After, Garrett?" "It's already after. Did you see the judge's face during her testimony? She didn't believe a single word. Not one. My ex-wife, just spent 4 days on the stand trying to convince this court that she mattered, and the only thing she proved is that she doesn't." He straightened his tie. He smoothed his jacket. He looked at the gallery, at the reporters, the associates, the handful of colleagues he had personally invited to watch this moment, and he winked. He actually winked. If you are watching this right now and you have ever been underestimated by someone who thought they were untouchable, stay with this story, hit that subscribe button, because what happens to Marcus Hartwell next will be the most satisfying thing you watch all week. The recess stretched to 45 minutes. And so Judge Cross had matters to attend to in chambers, and Marcus used every single minute of that time to build his throne out of thin air. He stood in the marble corridor outside courtroom 4B, surrounded by people, his people, associates from Hartwell Capital Group, his publicist, a young woman named Sloane, who typed furiously on her phone, preparing a post-victory press statement, his business partner Derek Saunders, who stood slightly apart from the group, arms crossed, watching Marcus with an expression that nobody in that hallway bothered to read, because Marcus was performing. 17 million, he announced, holding up his espresso cup like a toast. "I kept every property, the downtown tower, the waterfront development, the Meridian portfolio, every single one. My attorneys, Garrett, to stand up and take a bow, proved that everything was acquired independently. She gets the house in Westlake. That's it. The house. A depreciating asset in a cooling market." He laughed. The people around him laughed with him. That is what money does. It turns cruelty into comedy. "You know what she asked for?" Marcus continued, loosening his tie with the casual ease of a man who has never been denied anything. "She asked for equity recognition. She actually told the court that she was instrumental in building Hartwell Capital. She said, and I quote, that she found the seed investors, structured the initial LLC filings, and managed the books for the first 5 years." He paused. He looked around the group. He lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "And she did. She absolutely did." Another pause, then the grin. But I made sure there was no paper trail, no co-signatures, no equity agreements. I paid her a salary, a generous salary. So, on paper, she was an employee, not a partner, not a co-founder. An employee. He snapped his fingers. "And employees, my friends, do not get equity in a divorce. Isn't that right, Garrett?" Garrett nodded once, thin-lipped. "The documentation supports Marcus's position entirely." "The documentation supports my position entirely," Marcus repeated, savouring each word like wine. "Because I created the documentation. 15 years ago, I sat down and I thought, what if this marriage ends? What if she tries to take what's mine? And I built a wall, brick by brick, contract by contract. Every signature she ever put on anything rooted her further from ownership. She never even noticed." Clear his throat. He sipped his espresso. His eyes found the door to the women's restroom down the hallway, where he knew Vivian had disappeared 20 minutes ago with her attorney. He stared at that door with the look of a man watching something die. "She's probably crying right now," he said. "Good. She should be. She wasted the best years of her life helping me build something magnificent, and she didn't have the brains to protect herself legally. That's not my fault. That's Darwinism." Sloane looked up from her phone. "Marcus, the reporter from the Business Journal, wants a quote for the evening edition. What do you want me to?" Tell her Marcus Hartwell's divorce is concluded and his business operations remain entirely intact and unaffected. She had to tell her the claims made by the opposing party were found to be without merit, and tell her, he straightened his posture and lifted his chin, tell her that Marcus Hartwell looks forward to his next chapter, with the same vision and determination that built his empire. Got it. He finished his espresso and crushed the paper cup in his fist. Across the corridor, unseen and unnoticed, the door to the women's restroom opened. Vivian stepped out. Her face was composed. Her eyes were dry. In her left hand, held casually against her thigh, was a thin, manila folder that had not been in her possession when she entered that restroom. Her attorney, Catherine Wells, walked beside her, and just for one moment, one fraction of a second, Catherine's eyes met Derek Saunders' eyes across the crowded hallway. Master Derek gave the smallest nod in the history of human gestures. Then he uncrossed his arms, put his hands in his pockets, and returned his attention to Marcus's performance. Nobody noticed. Nobody ever notices the hinge until the door swings. Let me take you back. 9 months before this courtroom. A different building. A different kind of silence. Vivian sat in Catherine Wells's office on the 14th floor of a modest legal practice downtown. The office had no mahogany, no panoramic views. The furniture was functional. The coffee was from a drip machine, and the woman sitting across from Vivian was the only attorney in the city who had returned her call. Every other firm turned me away, Vivian said quietly. 3 of them are on Marcus's retainer. 2 more said there wasn't enough evidence to justify the cost. Whilst the last one told me to accept the settlement and move on. Catherine took off her glasses and set them on the desk. Tell me what you have. Vivian opened her bag and removed a single USB drive. It was small and unremarkable, the kind of thing you might use to store vacation photos or old tax returns. But what was on that drive had taken Vivian 3 years to compile, starting on the night she first understood that her husband was not merely selfish, but strategic, that he had spent their entire marriage building a legal architecture designed to render her invisible. Clear as throat. On this drive, Vivian said, there are 412 files, emails, internal memos, accounting records, and bank transfer confirmations spanning 15 years. I see they show that Marcus systematically restructured his business entities to remove my name from all founding documents, rerouted profits through shell companies to minimize the visible value of marital assets, and most importantly, they show that the financial declarations he submitted to this court 3 months ago are fraudulent. He undervalued his real estate portfolio by approximately $23 million. Catherine stared at the drive. Where did you get this? I was his bookkeeper for 5 years. He changed the passwords after the separation, but he forgot, or didn't care enough to remember, that I had set up the original backup servers. Every document that was ever created, modified, or deleted on Hartwell Capital's internal system was automatically mirrored to a cloud server that I configured in year 1. I see he deleted the originals. The mirrors still exist. Catherine picked up the USB drive. She turned it over in her fingers. Then she looked at Vivian with the expression of a woman who had just been handed a loaded weapon and was deciding exactly where to aim. This is enough to reopen discovery. This is enough for a fraud referral to the State Attorney General. This is enough to... I know what it's enough for, Vivian said, but I don't want to use it yet. Catherine frowned. Vivian, if we file this now, Garrett Brooks will bury it in motions. He'll challenge the chain of custody. He'll argue the backup server was unauthorized access to proprietary business systems. He'll tie it up for 2 years, and Marcus will have time to restructure, move assets offshore, and make everything disappear again. I've watched him do this to 3 former business partners. He is a master of delay. She leaned forward. I want him to win first. The room went very quiet. I want him to stand in that courtroom and declare, under oath and on the record, that his financial disclosures are complete and accurate. I want him to perjure himself with the confidence of a man who believes he has already won. And then, only then, do we introduce the evidence. Catherine sat back in her chair. She was quiet for a long time. Then a slow, careful smile spread across her face. Not a smile of cruelty, a smile of precision. You want to let him build the trap and lock himself inside it. I want him to celebrate inside the trap, Vivian said. I want him to pop champagne inside the trap, and then I want to show him the walls. Over the next 9 months, they built their case in absolute silence. Catherine retained a forensic accounting firm, paid for with money Vivian had quietly saved from her salary over 7 years, deposited in an account Marcus never knew existed. The accountants traced every shell company, every redirected profit stream, every undervalued asset. They built a financial map of Marcus Hartwell's empire that was more detailed than anything his own accountants possessed. And then there was Derek Derek Saunders, Marcus's best friend and business partner, who had contacted Vivian 4 months into her preparation with a simple, devastating message. He's been stealing from me too. If this story is already making your heart race, drop a like right now and keep watching, because the satisfying part hasn't even started yet. After Derek brought the internal documents that Vivian's cloud mirrors couldn't reach, the offshore accounts, the shadow ledgers, the private communication in which Marcus openly bragged about deceiving the court, back in the courtroom. The recess ended. Judge Cross returned to the bench with the weight of her robes settling around her like the folds of a verdict already forming. Marcus sat down at the plaintiff's table. He buttoned his jacket. He crossed one leg over the other. He was the picture of composed authority. A man who had already mentally left this courtroom and was planning where to have dinner tonight. Perhaps that new place on 5th Street. Perhaps he would bring Sloane. She had been giving him those looks lately, and now that the divorce was finalised, Mr.
Hartwell.
Judge Cross's voice cut through the room like cold water. Yes, Your Honour. Before I issue my final ruling, I want to confirm for the record that the financial declarations you submitted to this court on June 14th represent a complete and accurate accounting of all your assets, holdings, and business interests. Is that correct? Marcus didn't hesitate, not even for a heartbeat. That is correct, Your Honour. Complete and accurate. Clear his throat. Garrett leaned over. Standard confirmation. She's closing the loop before the ruling. We're fine. Marcus nodded. Of course they were fine. They were more than fine. He looked across at Vivian and tilted his head. A small, almost pitying gesture, like a man watching a bird with a broken wing try to fly. Vivian did not look back. Oh, she was writing something on a notepad. Her hand was steady. And you confirm, Judge Cross continued, adjusting her glasses, that you have disclosed all business entities in which you hold an ownership interest, whether domestic or international. I do, Your Honour, including any subsidiaries, holding companies, or offshore entities. A flicker, just the smallest flicker across Marcus's jaw, a micro-expression so brief that only someone who'd spent 15 years studying that face would have caught it. Vivian caught it. Your Honour, I have no offshore entities, Marcus said, his voice smooth as polished marble. My business operations are entirely domestic and fully transparent. Thank you, Mr. Hartwell. Judge Cross made a note. Then she looked up at the courtroom. Before I deliver my ruling, I understand the defendant's counsel has a motion to present. Ms. Wells? Marcus turned his head. For the first time since the recess, something crossed his face that wasn't arrogance. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was confusion. The confusion of a man who has controlled every variable and suddenly hears a sound he can't identify. Catherine Wells stood. She buttoned her burgundy blazer with one hand. In the other, she held the thin manila folder. Thank you, Your Honour. The defence moves to introduce new evidence under Rule 60B, fraud upon the court. The word fraud landed in the courtroom like a glass breaking in a cathedral. Marcus's smile didn't disappear. Not yet. But it froze. It became something else, a mask trying to hold its shape, while the face beneath it began to shift. Garrett, he whispered. What is this? Garrett Brooks was already flipping through his files. His hands, for the first time in this entire trial, were not perfectly steady. But Marcus was Marcus, and Marcus did not panic. Marcus had survived hostile takeovers, SEC inquiries, and 3 separate lawsuits from former partners. Marcus had once talked his way out of a fraud investigation by convincing the investigator to invest in his next project. Marcus Hartwell did not lose composure. Marcus Hartwell adjusted. He leaned toward Garrett. This is a bluff. She's got nothing. If she had something real, she would have introduced it during discovery. This is a Hail Mary. Garrett said nothing. His eyes were on Catherine Wells. Marcus sat back. He even managed a small laugh, quiet enough for only the front row to hear. He shook his head like a parent watching a child attempt something foolishly ambitious. Your Honour, Garrett said, rising, the defence had ample opportunity to present evidence during the discovery phase. Introducing new materials at this stage is but Mr. Brooks, Judge Cross said, and her tone contained the kind of quiet that silences entire buildings. I will determine what is and is not appropriate in my courtroom. Sit down. Garrett sat. Marcus leaned forward and whispered to him again. Relax. Whatever she has, it's nothing we can't explain. I've covered every angle, every single one. There is not a document in existence that ties me to anything she's claiming. Clear his throat. He was so sure, listen to me, he was so absolutely, completely, bone-deep sure that he was untouchable. And that certainty, that towering, soul-blinding certainty, was the most dangerous thing in that courtroom. Because certainty is not the same as truth. Certainty is just arrogance wearing a better suit. Marcus looked at Vivian one final time. She had stopped writing. Her hands were folded again. And for the first time in this entire trial, for the first time in perhaps the entire past year, She looked directly at him. Their eyes met, and something in her gaze made his breath catch. Not tears, not defeat, not the broken, pleading look he had seen the night he told her he wanted a divorce, when she stood in their kitchen in bare feet and asked him if 15 years meant nothing. No, this was something else entirely. Her eyes were calm. Her eyes were clear. Her eyes held the quiet, the absolute stillness of a woman who knows exactly what is about to happen, because she built it. Marcus looked away first. He covered it well. He adjusted his watch. He cleared his throat. He whispered something to Garrett about dinner reservations, but he looked away first, and in the mathematics of human confrontation, looking away first is a confession. Catherine Wells opened the manila folder. Your Honour, the defence presents Exhibits 47 through 93, 46 new documents, 46 pages of truth that Marcus Hartwell had spent 15 years trying to make invisible. The courtroom clerk began distributing copies, and the air in that room changed. Catherine Wells did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The document spoke with a volume that no human throat could match. Your Honour, what Exhibit 47 is a certificate of incorporation for an entity called Meridian Holdings International, registered in the Cayman Islands on March 15, 2019. The sole beneficial owner, as listed in the confidential registry filing, is Marcus Anthony Hartwell. Marcus's jaw tightened. One small muscle, one tiny pull of tendon against bone. But in a courtroom, under fluorescent lights with every eye in the gallery watching, that small muscle was an earthquake. Mr. Hartwell testified under oath moments ago that he holds no offshore entities, Catherine continued, her voice steady and precise as a surgeon's hand. Exhibit 48 is a wire transfer confirmation showing $14.2 million moved from Hartwell Capital Group's domestic operating account to Meridian Holdings International between 2019 and 2023. And of these transfers were disguised as consulting fees to a firm called Greystone Advisory, which, as Exhibit 49 demonstrates, is a shell company with no employees, no office, and no operations. Its registered agent is Marcus Hartwell's personal attorney. She let that settle. She let the silence do its work. Clears throat. Exhibit 52 is an internal email from Marcus Hartwell to his accountant dated January 8th, 2022. I will read the relevant portion. Catherine lifted the page. Her voice was clear and unhurried. Make sure the Meridian accounts don't show up on anything Vivian can access. She's getting suspicious about the quarterly numbers. Reroute the Greystone invoices through the secondary ledger. If this goes to divorce court, I want her to find nothing. A sound moved through the gallery. Not a gasp, something lower. Something more visceral. The sound of 40 people simultaneously understanding that they were watching a man's empire unravel in real time. Marcus grabbed Garrett's arm. Object to this right now. Garrett stood. Your Honour, the defence is presenting materials of questionable provenance. We have had no opportunity to... Mr. Brooks, Judge Cross removed her glasses. When Judge Eleanor Cross removes her glasses, attorneys who have practiced in her courtroom for decades know that the conversation has fundamentally changed. Your client just testified under oath that he holds no offshore entities. He testified that his financial declarations are complete and accurate. I'm now looking at documentary evidence that directly contradicts that testimony. You may sit down and allow the court to review this evidence. Or you may continue objecting, and I will note your objections for the record while I review the evidence anyway. Choose. Garrett sat down. He did not look at Marcus. Catherine Wells continued. She was relentless. She was methodical. She was everything Marcus had dismissed when he called Vivian's legal team, quote, a boutique firm that handles car accidents and slip and fall cases. Exhibit 55 through 61 detail a pattern of systematic asset undervaluation. Mr. Hartwell declared his downtown commercial tower, the Hartwell Meridian Center, at a value of $31 million. An independent appraisal conducted by Morrison and Associates, a nationally recognized commercial real estate valuation firm, places the current market value at $54.7 million. So the discrepancy of $23.7 million was not an error. Exhibit 62 is an internal memo in which Mr. Hartwell's own CFO warns him that the declared valuation is, and I quote, indefensibly low and will not survive scrutiny if anyone actually looks at it. She paused. She looked at Marcus. No one was supposed to look at it, she said quietly. That was the plan. Marcus's face had changed. The transformation was not sudden. It was geological, like watching a cliff face begin to slide. The tan seemed to drain from his skin in real time. His steel grey eyes, which had spent the entire morning radiating contempt and superiority, were now wide and unfocused, darting between Catherine, the judge, and the stack of documents that the clerk was still distributing. Garrett, he whispered. Yet, and his voice cracked on the second syllable. Garrett, how do they have internal memos? How do they have the Cayman filings? These were encrypted. These were on private servers. Garrett did not answer because Garrett was reading Exhibit 63 and Garrett had gone very, very pale. Exhibit 63, Catherine announced, is a sworn affidavit from Derek Saunders, Mr. Hartwell's business partner of 12 years, confirming that Mr. Hartwell maintained parallel accounting records, one for official use and one reflecting actual financial positions. Mr. Saunders has provided access to the secondary ledger system, which documents an additional $19.4 million in undisclosed assets across 4 jurisdictions. Marcus turned around. He physically turned his body in his chair and looked into the gallery. Derek Saunders was sitting in the 3rd row. Their eyes met. Derek did not look away. Derek did not smile. Derek did not gloat. Derek simply looked at the man who had stolen from him for a decade, and he held that gaze with the exhausted calm of someone who has finally stopped carrying a weight that was never his to bear. Derek, Marcus said it out loud, in the courtroom, not a whisper, a word spoken at full volume, cracking with disbelief. Derek, what did you do? Judge Cross's gavel came down once. Mr. Hartwell, you will address the court, not the gallery. But Marcus couldn't stop staring. The betrayal, the word itself was almost laughable. A man who had betrayed everyone, now choking on the taste of his own medicine, was written across his face in a language that everyone in that courtroom could read. Besser cleared his throat. Your Honour, Catherine said, I have 14 more exhibits to present, but I believe the court has sufficient basis to address the immediate matter. The defendant moves for 3 things. First, an emergency injunction, freezing all of Marcus Hartwell's domestic and international assets, pending a full forensic audit. Second, a motion to vacate the preliminary property division and reopen the divorce settlement in its entirety. And third, a referral of Mr. Hartwell's testimony to the district attorney's office for investigation of perjury and fraud upon the court. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that has physical weight, that presses against your eardrums, that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. Judge Cross put her glasses back on. Achamshiga reviewed the documents in front of her for what felt like an eternity but was likely 3 minutes. Then she looked up. The emergency injunction is granted. All assets held by Marcus Hartwell, individually or through any corporate entity, are frozen effective immediately. The preliminary property division is vacated. This court will schedule a full evidentiary hearing within 30 days, and I am personally referring Mr. Hartwell's testimony to the district attorney for potential perjury charges. She looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Hartwell, you stood in my courtroom and you lied to me. You looked me in the eye, you raised your right hand, and you lied. I have sat on this bench for 19 years, and I have seen men try to hide assets in every way imaginable. But I have rarely seen someone do it with the level of calculated arrogance that you have displayed today. You did not merely lie, you celebrated the lie. You treated this courtroom like your personal stage. That ends now. Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time in his adult life, perhaps the first time in his entire existence, Marcus Hartwell had nothing to say. No clever retort, no legal maneuver, no charming deflection. His mouth was open and his eyes were empty, and the man who had walked into this courtroom like a king was sitting in his chair like something hollowed out. If you have stayed with this story to this moment, you understand that karma does not forget, and I need you to share this with someone who needs to hear it right now, because this story is not over yet. Vivian sat at the defendant's table. She had not moved, she had not smiled, she had not spoken. Her hands were still folded. Her breathing was still even. She looked at the judge with the quiet gratitude of a woman who had waited years for someone in a position of authority to simply look at the evidence and tell the truth. Catherine placed a hand on Vivian's shoulder. A small touch, a private one. The touch of a woman who had once left her career because powerful men kept escaping, and who had finally watched one of them sit still long enough for the walls to close in. The weeks that followed were not kind to Marcus Hartwell. They were not meant to be. The asset freeze was devastating and immediate. Marcus, who had spent 3 decades building an empire designed to project invulnerability, discovered that invulnerability has a very specific weakness. It depends entirely on cash flow. And when every account, every credit line, every investment vehicle bearing his name was locked behind a judicial order, the machinery of his life ground to a halt with a sound like bones breaking. His tenants could not pay rent into frozen accounts. His contractors could not be paid from frozen accounts. 3 active development projects, representing a combined value of over $40 million, stalled simultaneously. Subcontractors filed liens. Investors panicked. The Hartwell Meridian Center, his crown jewel, his glass and steel monument to his own greatness, had a delayed, indefinitely notice posted on its construction fence within 2 weeks. Clear his throat. The perjury referral moved faster than anyone expected. Should the district attorney, already under public pressure to prosecute white-collar crime more aggressively, convened a grand jury within 45 days. Marcus Hartwell was indicted on 3 counts of perjury and 2 counts of fraud upon the court. His mugshot, that angular, arrogant face, now grey and gaunt under police station lighting, appeared on the front page of the Business Journal, the same paper that had published his triumphant quote about looking forward to his next chapter. His social world collapsed with the efficiency of a controlled demolition. The colleagues who had laughed at his jokes in the courthouse corridor, gone. The associates who had toasted his victory, gone. Sloane, his publicist, issued a statement announcing she was no longer representing Mr. Hartwell and wished him well in his future endeavours. Into the language was corporate, the meaning was surgical. Garrett Brooks withdrew as his attorney, citing irreconcilable differences regarding client disclosure. In plain language, Garrett discovered that Marcus had lied to him too. The parallel books, the offshore accounts, the shadow ledger, Garrett had known none of it. He had built his legal strategy on a foundation that Marcus had told him was solid ground, and it turned out to be quicksand. Garrett was now facing his own Bar Association inquiry for submitting fraudulent financial documents, even unknowingly. Marcus sat alone in his penthouse apartment, the one asset not yet frozen, as it was technically held in a trust, and he made phone calls. He called Derek, voicemail. He called his brother in California. His brother listened for 30 seconds and said, "You did this to yourself." "Ask Marcus," and hung up. He called 2 former partners he had driven out of business. Neither answered. He called Vivian. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Vivian?" His voice was stripped of everything, the arrogance, the performance, the charm. What was left was raw and cracked, like old paint peeling from a wall to reveal the rot beneath. "Vivian, I need to talk to you. You're talking to me. You have to understand, everything I did because I was afraid. I was afraid of losing what I built. I was afraid that if the marriage ended, I would lose everything. I was trying to protect. You were trying to protect yourself. From me, the woman who helped you build it." Silence. "I know," he said. "You don't know, Marcus. You still don't know. You're not calling because you understand what you did. Oh, you're calling because you're experiencing the consequences. Those are not the same thing." She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, clear, and completely without malice. "I hope one day you understand the difference, but that's your work to do, not mine. Not anymore." She hung up. Marcus sat in his penthouse, surrounded by furniture that cost more than most people's houses, wearing a watch worth more than most people's cars, and he understood, in the hollow, echoing way that only total loss can teach, that he had spent 15 years building a fortress and forgotten to put anything worth protecting inside it. The forensic audit took 4 months. When it was complete, the court's revised property division awarded Vivian 43% of Marcus's total verified assets, a figure that, after accounting for the hidden offshore accounts, the undervalued properties, and the shadow ledger's $19 million, came to approximately $31.6 million. But Vivian did not celebrate. That was never who she was. She moved quietly, deliberately, like a woman stepping out of a long and lightless tunnel into open air. She purchased a modest brownstone in the Arts District, not a penthouse, not a monument, just a home with tall windows and morning light. She reopened her forensic accounting practice, specializing in financial abuse cases and divorce proceedings. Within 6 months, she had more clients than she could serve alone. She hired 2 associates, then 4, then 7. She became the person she had always been, the person Marcus had spent 15 years trying to convince her she wasn't. Tarzan clears throat. Here is the truth that Marcus Hartwell learned too late, and that every person watching this needs to carry with them. Arrogance is not strength. Arrogance is fear wearing a mask of confidence. It does not protect you, it blinds you. It makes you believe that the people you have hurt are too small to fight back, too broken to remember, too weak to build a case against you in absolute silence for 9 months while you're busy winking at reporters in courthouse hallways. Vivian never raised her voice. She never made threats. She never posted on social media. She never gave interviews. She simply did the work, quietly, precisely, patiently. And when the moment came, the truth did what truth always does when it is given the chance. It spoke loudly enough to fill every room Marcus Hartwell had ever tried to control. And let this story be the reminder. The people who move in silence are not weak. They are building something. And by the time you hear them, it is already too late. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something real, then subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because every story we tell here carries the same truth. Karma does not shout, but karma always arrives. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, have you ever watched someone celebrate a victory that they did not yet realize was their downfall? Have you ever been underestimated by someone who later learned the cost of that mistake? And what would you have said to Marcus if you had been sitting in that courtroom the moment the truth came out? Drop your answer below. I read every single one.